topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
And welcome to Triversity Talk. I am Wendy Stewart, and I am so happy to be here with you tonight. Before I bring on our amazing guest, I just want to give everybody a reminder. If you are in the tri-state area and you are near Milford, Pennsylvania, we are going to be sponsoring Pike County Pride. It's going to be a huge event on September 10th. So please join us. Again, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. We're only an hour and 35 minutes from New York City too. So where I'm broadcasting from tonight, but please join us. It'll be a fantastic community event. We will have vendors, we'll have information, we'll have performers, and we hope to really have you there. So, tonight's guest, speaking of fairs, right? I have an amazing friend, Apollonia Cruz, and besides being an incredible activist, she does a huge Bronx Pride every year. And I was fortunate enough to be able to perform at her Bronx Pride and get to know many of the people that came there as vendors from different organizations. And I met this amazing woman. I just loved everything about her commitment. She's a national and statewide activist, a woman of transgender experience. She knows the importance of competent gender affirming care. She's now a case manager with Community Healthcare Network. Okay. And you know what? I consider her an expert. We've only chatted a little bit, but let me not talk anymore. Let me introduce the one, the only, Savannah Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Wendy.
It's really great to see you again. Of course, I like seeing you in person, but virtual's good too. How are you doing this evening? You're so busy.
Yeah, I've had such a busy day. I was on with University of Rochester earlier. They're developing a new program more targeted towards cisgender individuals and service providers around the exact topic we're going to talk about tonight, which is gender affirming care. So that was great to be a part of that.
Well, it's great to be a part of it because you certainly have a background and you certainly seem to have a hand in everything. How did you get so knowledgeable and how did you get started in this?
So my story starts actually down south. I've been transitioning for 25 years. I started in Georgia, and I grew up with ultra conservative religious parents. And so the whole conservative part of it didn't allow me to know exactly what my identity was.
Were you like Southern Baptist or something?
Southern Baptist, you got exactly right. Yeah. So you know how that goes. It's pray the gay away, and I mean, trans was not in the vocabulary so much as it is up in New York, up in Philadelphia, which is where I originally started this work. So after turning of age, I decided to go to school and start school in Philadelphia. And when I got to Philadelphia, that was actually my first experience with someone of trans experience. And it was from the ballroom culture of all things. Her name was Renee.
I got to backtrack a little because this is an awful lot. So you basically went from Southern Baptist and you knew you were trans.
I knew I was trans, but I didn't have the terminology for it because down there you're just gay or, unfortunately vocabulary around identities is very limited. So,
well, of course, and even to be gay coming from Southern Baptist, no matter where you are on that spectrum, getting any kind of support in that religion and in that part of the country, although I know a lot of gay people from Alabama, of course, but growing up is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you get no support. Your support is going to see a therapist that hopefully that'll get it away, or be an altar boy that hopefully that'll pray it away.
Were you an altar boy?
I was an altar boy, and I was also in conservative therapy. So I experienced the bad part of that down south, and I had no support. High school, being bullied, almost dropped out of high school. Actually, my last year I was homeschooled because of the bullying. So I went through a lot, and like you said, there was actually zero support for it at that time. I mean, we're talking 25 years ago.
Of course, but your first ticket out then would have been, you probably had your sights set on getting out of Alabama.
Yeah, I had my sights set on getting out of the South and coming up north. I knew it's a little more liberal up here. I knew the state of trans was not good even then, but I knew it was better than where I was. And I knew I would find some sort of support.
Community.
Yeah. Which I did. And like I said, it originally started in the ballroom. And it started with trans women who were doing survival sex work, right? So that was my first introduction into trans people. But I always knew that I wanted to take a different angle. I didn't want to become a statistic, I guess you could say.
You could totally say, I don't know if you've seen the movie Stroll yet, but do you know what it's about?
I do, and I know a lot of the ladies that are.
We know those girls, and some of those girls. Oh my God, I love Egypt LaBeija on so many levels, and she's a survivor. And you're right, that statistic of the amount of trans girls that are murdered is huge, and the fact that people don't care a lot of the time. I mean, that's why we have Transgender Day of Remembrance, right? We have to say their names, so that once their name is spoken, that was a person. So here you go. You find yourself, you're in Philadelphia and part of this whole scene.
I'm part of the whole scene. I was able to get to Philadelphia by convincing my parents to let me attend Temple University. So I'm a part of this whole scene, but I'm living in a dorm room in solitude, still trying to figure out my identity. And at this point, I hadn't came out to my parents about being trans. They still thought I was just, gay man. So a couple years passed, and I actually started my medical transition with hormone replacement therapy. And that was the time I felt I needed to come out with my parents. Wow. Which was a whole nother situation of its own. We didn't speak for 2 years after coming out. And then finally my mother broke down and came to realize that, just like you said, I'm a person, and more importantly, I'm her child.
You're her child. I mean, I have a daughter. You're her child. That's it. It just ends there. And I know it's not always that simple, but you know what? The deal breaker is you're the child. That's the mother. Unconditionally.
Yeah, it's so sad. If you go down on the Christopher Street Pier at any given night, you'll see a bunch of young kids hanging out. A lot of those kids have been rejected, have been pushed out of their homes, are homeless, are facing homelessness, simply because of their identity, So we're still in that state, especially in minority communities like Black and Brown communities, Latin communities, where masculinity is valued in men. And femininity is disvalued. So it still happens. And I am so grateful to be a part of the solution and not the problem at this point.
Right. But it speaks volumes about you that you were able to be part of the solution. And that, when we go back, first of all, you were fortunate enough that you were academically there enough that you could go to Temple University. You had that going on. Not having that going on, kids come up here and all that is open to them is sex work. They have way. There's not an education, there's not, a gold ring that's going to come on a merry-go-round. So they have to resort to sex work. And a lot of them don't survive it.
And that's really sad, and actually when I first started school, I wanted to do criminal justice. My actual dream job was to be a criminal profiler for the FBI.
It really
Yeah, actually, believe it or not. But then I got involved with this really amazing organization, which was Philadelphia Fight. They're very well known for doing HIV and AIDS work and also doing gender affirming care, even back then when it wasn't as hot of a topic as it is today.
Right.
And through that experience, I changed my major to social work, and more specifically with concentration in gender studies.
Yeah.
So that's how I actually got into this field. Like I said, it started with survival sex workers, trans women of color mainly, and the ballroom culture within the LGBT community.
Right. Amazing. So you decided to become a social worker, and you decided to serve, really. It's about serving.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I had to. I still had those Southern values at heart, my humanity, and my humanity was on full display at that point. What I saw around me, I wanted to be a part of, but I wanted to be a part of it in a positive way and not, like I said earlier, not a statistical way.
Right.
I know I didn't want to do sex work. I wasn't against it. I'm not judgmental against it. I have amazing friends that do survival sex work, and I get it and understand it even more better today than I did in Philadelphia.
And by the way, it's great that you get it and understand it. Okay, because that community
a lot of people don't.
Is very, very misunderstood. So that is great that you get it and understand it, and that you're sharing that.
Yeah, I look at it like sex work is work. Whether you do that for survival means or whether you do that for pleasure means. I mean, again, it goes back to the humanity of it and the fact that people are human. People live a human experience, and that experience is not all the same. It would be a very dull world.
Thank you.
If everybody lived the same.
That is exactly right. So you started out working as a social worker. Now, did you get case studies almost immediately? What was your beginning like in the career of being a social worker?
So my beginning actually was while I was still completing my degree. I actually didn't complete my degree until I moved up here, which I did at Stony Brook University in 2019. I finished my education. But in the meantime of moving up here, and I put education on pause for a moment to medically transition, to focus on me, to get a better understanding of Savannah. Because if you're not there, if you don't have a deep understanding of yourself, this work can be emotionally challenging, especially when it's so close to you. I'm trans and I'm helping other trans people. So the stories that I hear are heartbreaking for me, not only on a professional level, but a personal level. So I actually started out doing outreach work on Strohs. With trans sex workers, giving them condoms, giving them safer sex supplies. And we used to go out and kind of actually make sure the ladies were safe on the stroll. We were kind of a support for the ladies in the middle of that work. So that it also strengthened my skills. So by the time I graduated, I already had the skills to do those case studies.
Right, exactly. You had the stuff that people are first getting. You had already been doing it. And I just want to clarify for anyone listening, you heard us say the stroll. The stroll, in every different state, the stroll can be in a different place. But in New York, of course, it was over in the meatpacking district.
Yeah. That was the big stroll and over on Christopher Street. And even all the boroughs have individual strolls where trans women do sex work. But the main stroll, yes, was in the meatpacking, and which the movie is based off of the meatpacking district.
Yeah. The movie just really blew me away. I have to say that movie should be everywhere because no one's made a movie about that. And nobody really shined a light on the people that were the working girls, that were working the streets like that, or what they went through. Or there were parts in that movie where the names were brought up and they were like, oh, I didn't know she was gone. so many of them were gone. They were murdered. Okay.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
That's the tragic reality that trans people live in every day when they leave their house.
Yeah.
It's just to make it back home safely. And when trans people don't, because they've been rejected by their family, they've been rejected by society, they've been rejected by the people that were supposed to care for them and love them and trust them. They become obsolete to the world, and the
Right.
world kind of just turns the other cheek and doesn't acknowledge it. So when they do end up getting murdered while trying to survive, it just gets swept under the rug. They get misgendered in the media. It just becomes another statistic, and it's really sad. We're still facing that, especially with trans women of color. That is
Absolutely.
a big issue, even presently as we're speaking.
Well, definitely presently. Like if you and I were having this discussion like 8 years ago, I would say, I feel optimistic. I feel things are changing. Now I feel it's so backwards with all those bills out there and political ploys to go against they're using the trans community to further their own agenda. And I feel things have gotten a lot worse. And of course, in the States where they're really attacking the transgender community, it's made it very, very unsafe for people. Because there's always going to be crazies out there. But once they start reading about taking away the rights of transgender people, they'll say, oh yeah, well, of course, that's how it should be. That, I don't understand trans at all. I don't know what they'd say. I don't know what that is. That there's man and woman. And Savannah, even here, this show, Triversity, our center is based out of Milford, Pennsylvania. There are Facebook groups that write things. Oh my God, I read something this weekend that really absolutely makes your hair stand on end. This is 1 hour and 40 minutes from New York City. No comprehension. There's man and women and that's it. I don't know about this other stuff. This is a bunch of BS. I love that one. It's a bunch of BS. I mean, how did it get to be so backward?
Well, I think that trans people have become pawns for political agendas,
Yes,
just like you said. I think that we are the ones that they can attack because those people that they are preaching to are conservative. Those are the people that I grew up with. So I get it. I understand where that comes from, and people live in a very binary world, and anything that rocks theirs or makes them uncomfortable. And that's trans people because they don't understand it. And they don't take the time to get educated on the fact that we are not in the 1950s now. We are not in the 1940s where trans people were hidden. We are in a world where we should be celebrated. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. Right. Thankfully, New York does celebrate trans women. They do have laws in place state laws that override federal laws. But it is really sad, the state of affair and the amount of bills, and not only just trans people, but trans children that are trapped. I mean, there was one in Florida where they were going to lock up parents of trans children for allowing them to transition.
Right. And take children away from their parents. Take children away. I mean, the fact that we can even be saying those words right now completely blows me away. And yeah, you brought up trans children. There are, and there's so many young trans children now that have really good supportive parents, and they're up here and they're in the Northeast and they're getting support in terms of having play groups and being allowed to be their true self. And that is huge. Go down to other places, go down to Florida, and you look at what's happening there, and it's beyond sad, and it's absolutely scary. I mean, I don't have to tell you, there are families moving out of Florida now, specifically because of what we're talking about. I mean, can you imagine having a child that is trans, and the fact that that child could be taken away from you, or they can slap you with fines or things like that? This is nuts.
It is, and it's really nuts, even more so in the fact of all the work that people, such as myself and other activists, have put into making sure parents don't reject those children.
Right.
Those parents need support too, right? Because I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy for a parent who has a trans child to understand that, especially in a southern state. In a red state, that's not something that is easy for a parent. So they need that support. And we finally had got to a place to where things were turning, like you said earlier. And now, of course, those red states want to turn that around. And they're using, like I said, they're using us as political pawns to attack us. Because that's where their support is, right? That's where the MAGNA supporters are. They think that,
Absolutely.
people don't have a right to be their authentic, true self. And a lot of that has to do with their own uncomfortability. It doesn't have to do with the person existing who is trans.
No, it's got to do with anyone that's not like them. You're not like me. You're right. But
it's very cookie cutter in those states. Very cookie cutter.
Yeah, that is right. And it from the background you came from. So when you were handing out condoms at the stroll, when you were first early on in the game, like what kind of realizations did you have that you knew you wanted to get much deeper involved and advocate for change? What went off in your head?
Well, what went off in my head is I knew I had to, right? Because I had that privilege, like you said, of being able to access these resources, and I had the privilege of the color of my skin. Let's be real about that. And I had the privilege of being articulate to where I could talk to people about it. I knew how to navigate that. Right. And I felt like I needed to do that for trans women who couldn't navigate it. In addition to that, what happened was, I would see a girl on a Friday night, and Saturday I would get news that she had been attacked or murdered or vicious. And then I myself was attacked as an outreach worker on the stroll. I had a Molotov cocktail thrown at me from a car of guys, and I knew that my safety was at risk, but at the same time, it was an obligation. It was a value. It was just this burning in my chest. I said, I have to do something, and I have to, move forward with this. Handing out condoms is not enough. I have to fight legislation. I have to get people who make these decisions and who have the power to change this involved. And I have to get them to sit down and listen to us. At the very least, listen.
Right. That's kind of hard to do when you've had a Molotov cocktail thrown at you. And I'm sure if you went to file a report, nobody really gave a damn about it.
No, they didn't. And I had an actually really good friend of mine. And if you Google me under my previous name, Hornback, I started Justice for Erica Kills. She was a 20, I think she was 22 at the time. She was ran over 4 times repeatedly by someone who picked her up and claimed to know she wasn't trans. And when I went to file the actual official report, because again, it was another rejected trans youth who had no family. She had a disability, a walking disability. I was asked for my real name, which was already Savannah. I was told that I was trying to make something out of nothing, even though there was independent witness and videos of this guy backing over her, pulling forward and backing over her and pulling forward. And actually, I was intimidated to the point that is the reason that I left Philadelphia, because I was getting threatened by individuals who were in charge. Police were harassing me every time they saw me on the street. They would stop and give me a citation for something.
Are you kidding? Wow. I mean, I knew that happened up here. So it makes sense that it would happen in Philadelphia as well. So you were almost for trying to be honest and talk about, was this person murdered, by the way, or they were just ended up in the hospital?
No, they ended up in the hospital and died 3 days later because
so this is a murder, right?
This is
and you
were
doing the right thing and trying to file a report, and then you became branded yourself. I mean, this is the stuff that's just wrong. I'm sorry, but if you're any kind of religious person, I don't care what religion you practice, you have to know that this is wrong. It's just awful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's religion is very hypocritical, and it's sad because there are trans people who love higher powers too. We have higher powers
Well,
too. We
yeah,
we depend on
I
that
mean,
sin, and
right.
we
There's
have
no
nowhere to turn.
right. Right. There's no difference in the belief of the higher power. So how did you keep yourself with this going on? You seem to have continued to try and move forward. You didn't how did you not let rage and anger get in the way for you? Because you telling me this story is just, it's making me so angry.
For me, at an early onset, I got in contact with some shakers and movers in Philadelphia around trans stuff. So I had a very solid support network
Good.
that I could go to and let that rage out. It was more so hurt for me, confusion. It was fear for me. I was afraid to come out of my apartment. I lived in the neighborhood in Philadelphia, right on 12th and Spruce. So again, every time I came out of my house, I was stopped by police and accused of doing prostitution, laundering for the intent to prostitute, much like the law that was repealed in New York, walking while trans.
Right.
So it became a point, like I said, tension so bad that I had to get out of Philadelphia. I mean, my mental sanity could not stand up against it any longer. That is in addition to everything I had already witnessed up until this point. So
Right.
that was kind of the camel that broke the straw's back. And I said, let me keep going north. I had heard of all the great things that were going on in New York.
Yeah.
I knew there was a very strong trans community here. And so I decided to move up here and continue my education at Stony Brook University. And I'm glad I did.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Because you really realized early on, the way to get change is through the politics, unfortunately. Yeah, all the activism stuff, handing out condoms, and doing all of that, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the only thing that counts really is getting bills passed. All right. And becoming knowledgeable enough to work with insurance companies. Now, the issue, New York State, I hear, is good, in terms of the insurance companies and transitioning, but there's so many other states that are not good.
That is correct. I was the head of the New York State Department of Health Prevention Planning Committee for targeted communities, and one of those targeted communities was trans women. And this fought was about a 12-year fight because the state policymakers with the Department of Health claimed they didn't have the data. Of course, you don't have the data. Your reporting system only capture binary gender. So they were putting trans people under men who have sex with men. So it was an oxymoron. They weren't funding programs.
And wait, Savannah, what year was this was going on?
This was in the early 2000s.
Wow.
I would say, yeah. So that was, it was like they were actually trying to entrap people of why they couldn't do something, but they were the reason that they didn't have the data that they were seeking, because in their reporting system, the big one being AIRS, people who was coming into access services, especially social services, and LGBT spaces, there was nowhere to put trans people. They didn't even capture that as an identity. It was male, female, men who have sex with men, women who have sex with women, heterosexual, homosexual. That's it.
Wow. That's unbelievable. So how is a trans person going to get any kind of support or anything that they need when there's no category?
And how are you going to fund it? How are you going to get the data?
Well, you couldn't fund anything. What would you be funding? There wasn't a category to fund. Wow.
Well, that's why so much of the funding went to men who have sex with men. That's why the prevalence of HIV for many, many years was under MSM. Now that they have subtracted that, right, and that's one of the things I fought for, and that we did get changed in their reporting system, is now they do capture trans people. They capture a host of identities outside of a binary, right? So now they're able to get that data. And as of recently, actually last year, they just passed the Trans Equity Fund that is going to put money into these communities and that are going to actually be beneficial and serve the people that they need to serve, right?
So it's called the Trans Equity Fund.
It's called the Trans Equity Fund, and pardon me, I mean, I deal with so much data on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I know it was a couple $1 million that was passed that Kathy Hochul passed, but again, that was on the back of trans people who stood out and protested that because they didn't want to pass that, but they knew they had no choice.
Pass it. They did pass
They
it.
did pass it. They did pass it. And Melissa Slark, she's wonderful. She works in Queens. She's
amazing.
She's one of the insiders when it comes to political figures. And that was really great having her as a support on that. The new Pride agenda was really great on that. And then, of course, individual activists like me who took time out of my day, out of my life to go up to Albany, sometimes for a week at a time, all day, every day, meeting behind closed doors and just getting, we just wanted politicians to understand the humanity of the issue, not the agreement. A lot of times I think people get it messed up that trans people want to be accepted. No, we want to be respected. We want to exist. We want to have our right to exist just like anyone else. You want the same
rights as any other human being, and you are completely, but it's even crazy to have a conversation about that, right? That it becomes trans people, right? That it's like this, like it's put off on the side when there just should be complete acceptance.
Yeah, and for a long time, I think that a lot of that fell within our own community, and I have to bring this up, and this is already a hot issue for some people, but there's been this divide. I feel like the gay community, once gay marriage was passed, forgot that there was other sub-communities within the community that were still fighting for rights. Right. Those same people who fought for gay marriage, if you look back on the Stonewall riot, those are trans people, right? Yep. So we're there, Marsha P. Johnson, Julie. Yeah, so those are people who initiated this movement, and I feel like some parts of the community forgot that, hey, there's still these trans people who don't have these rights. Right. So I think that, one of the great things about the community in New York is we have a lot of powerful and strong activists who mean business and who are not afraid to fight for those rights.
Right. But you know what? You need to have the knowledge, okay? And from early on, you can articulate. You're a talker. You're a good talker. And you and I both know that I'm a communicator. I'm a good talker. That'll carry you very far if you are trying to push your own agenda. All right. You need to be able to have that because, the other side is going to come up against you, and you have to be able to have your cool and get your argument across for what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you have to compartmentalize your own trauma because as someone who is in the role I'm in, I'm constantly confronted with trauma. I'm constantly re-victimized with trauma, and you have to be able to have the skills to compartmentalize that, to be able to do this work. It is so important to realize that it's bigger than you. It's about a community. It's about a movement. It's about just like any other civil rights movement. Right. The trans movement is right in the forefront of that now. Right. It's the new civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement still continues. For many years, you couldn't even access hormones without having a year of therapy and a therapist saying, "Oh, they're trans enough to transition."
No, I remember that. It used to be that, right? Like I'm thinking that even when I was a kid, my God, Christine Jorgensen. Let's go way back. Yes. Right. And it was such a big thing. And then what came after that was you needed to have a year of therapy, and they put you through all of this. But what ended up happening from that, and I can even say like 7 or 8 years ago, I knew so many girls that were getting these hormones that they shouldn't have been putting them into their body. I mean,
Black market,
now, right. And I know this, but that's what was going on, God bless right now. And I'm going to say in New York, you can get the medical grade hormones that you need to get. But when we go to those other states where they're trying to pass those bills that people won't be able to get their hormones, what is going to happen from that? Well, it's going to be like back alley abortions, right? There's going to be people that come up with hormones that they're compounding and making that are not good things for people to take, but people will become desperate because they can't get the hormones that they need. I mean, this is a big issue, and again, Savannah, I'm glad we are in New York, because you can take the bull by the horns here. And thank you for all the activism you're doing. But, when you think of what's going on in the rest of the country, it's really crazy at this point.
It's heartbreaking. And I think that before I get into the local issues, but I want to piggyback off of what you said about the black market hormones. Even worse yet, people were getting black market silicone to feminize themselves, to be able to transition. I just recently had a patient who came into my office who had jet fluid put into her. That's what her breast is made of.
Wait, what did she have?
Jet fluid. Fluid that you put in a jet.
Oh, like goes into a.
So this is how desperate the old days were. People were injecting things, and then other trans women were injecting this into other trans women, and then they were closing these massive holes with Fix-A-Flat that you fix a flat tire with. But people were so desperate just to live in their authentic self. Right. That was the only thing that we had as trans women.
Right.
The only thing we had.
But that's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, we have some comments. I want to get the comments in before we talk more. There's so much to talk with you about. First of all, thank you, Apollonia Cruz, for tuning in. I sang you phrases, and yes, Apollonia's on. I always like to see who's on the show, and yes, that's great. So let's get back to what you were talking about. When you dealt with insurance companies, what were the biggest challenges?
Well, the first biggest challenge was not so much the private sector of insurance, but the public sector. Because that is where most trans women access their care. That's where most trans women access their medical care, is through the state Medicaid system. Because of economical factors, social factors, right. It's not like companies are standing out and offering trans women jobs, right? And if they are, they want you to be passable. They want you to be a good representation. They want you to have a higher degree. They're not assisting trans women in moving from survival sex work into an actual survival job. And if they do, they want to tokenize you. So again, as part of my position with the State Department of Health, I was at a unique position to where I could deal with the fact that the Medicaid system was considering gender affirming care. And when I say gender affirming care, I'm talking about medical transition, surgical transition, right. So facial feminization, breast augmentation, vaginoplasty, orchiectomies, anything that someone who is medically transitioning might need to do surgically, they were considering that cosmetic, regardless of the fact that people who have clinical degrees, people who have medical degrees were saying, no, this is not cosmetic. This is to alleviate an actual diagnosed condition.
Right.
So that was a 12-year fight with the health department. Finally, in 2016, we got them to overturn their policy. And I was one of the women who went and fought and advocated for that, and used my position as the co-chair of that work group to get them to understand. It also helped that I have a clinical background, and I can speak on the fact of gender dysphoria and how gender dysphoria is treated. And so the good thing is we got them to overturn their policy. So of course, once they overturned that policy, then it came down with the law of overturning that policy that any insurance company that does business in New York cannot deny gender affirming surgeries simply based on the fact that it's cosmetic. Now, do they still do it? Yes, we still have, especially private insurances. they still deny it. But there's always this clause to where you have to fight with them on it. People still have to have 2 letters, which is crazy to me. I think it's crazy that you need a therapist to say, "Oh, she's in her right mind to be trans."
Right.
Right?
I
It's just sad.
agree with you, but honestly, we've come so far from where it was, and I don't know one person that applied for gender affirming care through an insurance company in New York, right? I don't know one person that was turned down, and I do know a lot of people.
Yeah.
However, there's other states where, well, people end up coming here. That's what they have to do. They have to, find a way to work it so that they come here and get insurance. But this should be right all over the United States of America, hands down,
Well, what's unique is you do have to fight it a lot harder in other states, but when President Obama was in office and he did the Obamacare Act, there was actually a clause in there that insurances could not deny it, even on a federal level. So there is federal laws that protect against that type of discrimination. The problem is we need to educate more. We need to let people know this. And it is a lengthier fight than here in New York. Of course, like you said, here in New York, it's simple. You go to a consultation now, you get your 2 letters, you have your surgery. Again, thankfully, we're here. But there is a federal clause in the Affordable Care Act that it makes it illegal for insurances to deny gender affirming care. One of the people that come to mind who is actually I Am Jazz, she used that clause to transition and get insurances to cover that. So there are federal policies, but fighting those policies become exhausting. And not only that, but some people don't know that because now we're under attack with laws that are stopping those.
Right, exactly.
Especially if any Republican gets in office.
And also someone that is not savvy to that kind of thing, that hasn't been exposed educationally wise or cultural wise. All right. If you don't you're an amazing advocate. Okay. You can talk the talk, talk the walk. All right. And you can do it. And you can walk in anywhere and tell someone what they need to do, Savannah. That is key because otherwise they're just left to their own devices and they're not going to work it out. They're not going to work it out. And, unfortunately, everybody in the world I live in, of course, everyone I know that transitioned, they were savvy. They had, somewhat educated, culturally supported. It was a set piece. What about everybody else? What about everybody else? What about the girls that are putting jet fluid in their breasts? My God.
So that's
wow.
That falls on the ones of us that are savvy, right? So that's why I get up and go to work every day and do what I do. It's each one teach one. I don't know, that motto is very true for the trans community. I feel like, it's our job as trans women who are educated in it, who do know how to navigate the system, who have put in the work to navigate the system, to help our sisters and brothers, right? And help them from beginning to end, not keep the information. So that is one of the greatest things of my job. I have, in the last 3 years that I have worked with Community Healthcare Network, I have helped over 250 trans women and men access gender affirming care, and they had nowhere to go. Even undocumented trans women now, because they have the essential plans. So even women that are coming from other countries fleeing persecution, we've been able to assist them. Again, it's a wonderful state to live in New York if you're trans. Exactly. But New York has to educate other states on that. We have to now start mobilizing and going to these states that are attacking us and bring that same fierceness to those states and let them know that we're there. We're here, kind of like the motto, we're here, we're queer, we're not going anywhere.
Right, get over it. We're here, we're queer.
We're not going anywhere.
Right. Is, to your knowledge, is anything like that being mobilized? Are there groups that they're sending to help girls in other places, tell them what to do and how to do it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is constant protest. There is constant meetings behind closed doors in Washington going on to make this more of a federal
Right. That's what well, we're
focus.
talking, and I'm not as knowledgeable as you are about the legalities of everything. But to me, if it becomes like more of a federal thing, then it'll oversee the country and it'll be able to help people do what they want to do now.
Yeah, so I think that's where the focus has went to is Washington because, like you said, unfortunately, it's one thing to be able to navigate, but it's another thing if you're not behind a podium cracking something and passing bills. That is where the strength of it is. So there's been a lot of mobilization in Washington. Thank God a lot of these trans actresses and trans people who have large platforms are now
Yep.
involved and they're going and representing that. Uh, and I think that you are correct. It has to be a federal movement
Right.
because once the feds do something about it, then the states will have no say in it because it'll be a federal policy, much like the Affordable Care Act that Trump, when he was in office, actually overturned that part of the Affordable Care Act only was the trans part.
That
He
was
left the rest of it, but he stopped the
wow.
trans thing. So again, another way of attack. So right now, the strength is in politicians in Washington, people who are passionate about it. It doesn't just need to be trans people.
No,
It needs to
that's the
be.
thing, Savannah. It shouldn't be, okay? Everyone is got to get together behind this, all right? Everybody should support it, all right? Because we're talking about basic human rights, basic human medical rights, all right? And anyone who wants to live their true self should be allowed to. That's it. That's it. So we have,
Absolutely.
oh my God, we've got 1 minute left.
Oh my goodness!
Oh
Look
my
how
God,
fast time went.
the time went. Real quick, you were working on something in Rochester today.
Yeah. So University of Rochester, talking about expanding outside of the trans community, is developing a curriculum to do
Great.
trainings across the state of New York with healthcare providers on exactly what gender affirming care and how that will work. So I sat in from 9 to 4 today and reviewed their material, gave them expert feedback on the best practices on gender affirming care so they can take that knowledge and go to more areas outside of the metropolitan areas,
Right. And that's what
upstate
I'm
New York.
thinking. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was great to be a part of, to get feedback on. We're moving in the right direction. We're still here. We're still fighting. We're still going to fight. And we just got to keep moving forward. And
Well,
with the
that's what
support of shows like yours, the support of universities who
right.
are academics and can talk about this stuff,
The support in the
we'll
medical
get there.
communities. I've had the doctors
Yes.
from Mount Sinai on this show. I've had Melissa Sklar's on this show. The movers, the shakers, and the people that are gonna, make the change out there. And you know what? There's a ton of them right now. So I know what people read in the media, and I know how disheartening. But remember, like, look at you, Savannah. Look at everything that you're doing.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
excited. Yeah, and thank you so much. Thank you for this show. This show is education. This is what we need. We need more of this. Knowledge is power.
That knowledge is power, and that's what we're here to do, to share that knowledge. Now, before my guests go, I always like to take a picture on the computer. So
Oh
just
yeah.
cheese. One more and one more. Great. Thank you. You have been a terrific guest. Thank you for everything you're doing. I hope I get to see you before the next Bronx Pride. I am taking your umbrella that you gave me in your goodie bag that I got from Community Healthcare Network, the rainbow colored backpack. I'm taking that with the umbrella that was in there with me. I'm going to Alaska on Fridays. So
Oh, wonderful. Make sure you sparkle and send some love up there for me.
they need some love up there too. All right, Savannah,
Yes.
thank you for everything. And thank you for everybody who tuned in tonight. Good night. We'll see you
Absolutely.
next
Bye.
week. Bye.